Hello, everybody. All right. You ready for this? I'm Jeff Keighley, and so honored to be here with you at the first Tribeca Games Festival for something really special. What we're about to have is a conversation with a man who you all know is a good friend of mine, and also one of, I think, the gaming industry's most creative, visionary thinkers out there. And he's come all the way from Tokyo to join us today just for this weekend. He wanted to be here because, as we know, he loves games, but he also loves film. And we're going to talk a lot about sort of the blending of the screens between gaming and film with a legend. He needs no introduction, but of course, you know, he's hard at work on his brand new game, Death Stranding, at Kojima Productions. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about his career. And without further ado, please join me in welcoming the one and only Hideo Kojima. Sir, good to see you. Thank you. Yes. Kojima's here. All right, well, Mr. Kojima, it's such an honor to be with you here in New York City to talk about games and film. One thing, you've said before that, if 70% of the human body is filled with water, 70% of your body is filled with movies. You have an incredible love of cinema for a long time. And I remember the first time I went over to visit you in 2001 to visit you. We were working on a story about making of your game at the time, and went over there, and I learned a lot about your history. I was just out of college, just after 9/11, flew over there on a plane that no one was on, but I was there to visit you. And I know you talked a lot about how much New York meant to you, but also how much films meant to you. When you were growing up as a boy in Japan, you had a love of cinema. And in many ways, getting into the game industry and the game world was your way to tell stories because you couldn't afford what it would cost to make a movie back in the day. So could you maybe tell us about, the early days of young Hideo Kojima? Do you remember the first movie that you saw? Where did this love of cinema begin?
ですね、昔ビデオがなかったんですよ、子供の時は。
So first off, when I was a kid, there was no video.
なんで、テレビです。両親がすごく映画が好きで、物心つく前から映画は毎日テレビで見せられてました。
So first thing was TV. My parents love movies, so every day they were watching movies on the TV. So before I had any use of reason, I was already watching movies.
映画を見ないと寝かしてもらえないという。
They wouldn't let me go to sleep until I watched a certain amount of movies.
映画館はゴジラとかは親と一緒に行っていましたけど、10歳ぐらいになってからちょっと田舎に住んでたんですけど、バスと電車乗り継いで一人で、洋画を見に行くようになりました。そこからはずっと映画館です。
And well, when it comes to movie theaters, my parents took me to the movie theaters to watch Godzilla, whatnot. And when I was 10 years old, well, actually, I lived in the countryside, so I took the bus, I took the train, and I went on to the movie theaters. And ever since, well, it's been about movie theaters for me.
最初に一人で、見に行った映画がローラーボールっていうジェームズ・カーン主演の映画で。ですね。はい。
The first movie that I went to see on my own was James Caan's Rollerball.
チケット売り場で背が届かないんで、顔が見えないんで、切符買うときに女の人がチケット売り場の人が心配して僕を席まで連れてってくれたのを覚えてます。
I remember a lot when I went to the ticket office. It was a little bit high for me, so the lady couldn't see my face, and she got worried, and she walked me to my seat inside the theater.
Wow, so that was incredible. I remember, even like TV shows, like I Dream of Jeannie, things like that, Bewitched. You were watching those as a boy, and had this love of cinema. And one of the things I've always admired about you is that, even though you were in Japan, you had this sort of very worldly view of entertainment. You're very curious about Western culture, what movies people were watching, what was happening around the world. I think that's one of the reasons, many of your games have resonated with an audience around the world. Were there early films that really, spoke to you when you were, a teenager, a young boy, that, inspired you, and you still carry with, today when you're thinking creatively? What were some of those early films that really inspired you?
いろんな映画、テレビとかシリーズに至っていろんな話をされてますけど、特に小島監督で注目するべきところは世界中の映画を見ていることです。で、その中で自分が10代あるいはその前子供の頃に見た最初の頃の映画で今でも胸に秘めているインスピレーションを得た映画などありますか？
ちょっとさっきの話になるんですけど、子供の時映画館行くと、朝一に入って今みたいに入れ替え制じゃなかったんで、何時に行っても映画見れるんですけど、朝一に行って真ん中の席で見て2回目続けて席を変えて見てました。角度を変えて見るというか3D じゃないんですけど。
So it goes back to the ties back to the same conversation. But as a
kid,
I went early in the morning, and the same movie was playing in the same theater all day long. So I would watch it once. I would sit in the middle first thing in the morning, and then for the second time, I would change my seat so I could, in a way, see the movie from a different angle. It was not like 3D, but I would want to watch it from a different angle. There was no video, so I would just swap seats.
なんで、ビデオなかったんで全部記憶をしてました。絵コンテかけるぐらい集中して見てました。子供の時は。
And because there was no video, I was totally focused, so focused that when I was a kid, I'm fairly confident that I could have written the storyboards by memory of those movies.
で、影響を受けた映画っていっぱいあるんですけど、それを選ぶのは難しいですけど、一番好きな映画は2001年宇宙の旅です。
And there are so many movies. It's hard to pick one in specific that influenced me, but that's it. I guess my favorite movie is 2001 Odyssey to Space.
で、オールタイムベストで、2位の映画がこれも2位も不動なんですけど、スコセッシのタクシードライバーです。
And the all-time best, also my second favorite movie, that's also one thing that has never changed, but would be Martin Scorsese's Taxi Driver.
タクシードライバーはもうビデオ出た時は毎朝見てました。学校行く時とか会社行く時に。
So, when Taxi Driver, actually, when the video came out, I was watching it daily before going to school, before going to work. I was watching it daily in the morning.
Wow. And you mentioned... Just thinking of you there, watching the film again and again. Talking about, Taxi Driver, this festival, one of the co-founders, Robert De Niro, Taxi Driver, obviously, but speak about some of the actors that really loved in the early days. I know Mr. De Niro was one of those, right?
タクシードライバーといえば、ここのスポンサーであるロバート・デ・ニーロさんも入ってくるんですけど、その昔から好きだった俳優何人かいますか？ロバート・デ・ニーロさんもいるかもしれません。
最初は子供の時はスティーブ・マックイーンとブルース・リーとかです。チャールズ・ブロンソンとか。
At this stage, it would be Steve McQueen, Bruce Lee, Charles Bronson.
で、10代になってからデ・ニーロさんとかですね。
And when I was a teenager, that would be Robert De Niro was my favorite actor.
タクシードライバーとかレイジングブルとか、ヒートとか、ディアハンターとかでスネークのバンダナはランボーのスタローンじゃなくてディアハンターのデ・ニーロをオマージュしてる。勘違いされてますけど。
Robert De Niro comes Taxi Driver, Raging Bull, Heat, Deer Hunter. Actually, one thing is a lot of people think that Snake's bandana was inspired on Rambo's bandana, but it's not. It was inspired on Robert De Niro and Deer Hunter. That's where the bandana comes from.
タクシードライバーの名シーンがあるんですけど。鏡の前で「You talk me」ってばっかりやってましたからね。
That famous scene of Taxi Driver when he's looking at the mirror and saying "You're talking to me." I imitated so many times.
Many great memories of all these films. You also have a history of working with lots of great actors in your games. Haven't seen Mr. De Niro in one of your games yet, but who knows? It's like the idea is that you have all these actors that you love working with. We know that Death Stranding will have Norman Reedus, Mads Mikkelsen revealed, Guillermo del Toro in it. Tell us about sort of the idea of working with film actors in your games. you have a very cinematic view of making games. I think one of the things that a lot of us love about your games is that they blend great gameplay with really compelling narrative. And I think we all know, the cutscenes from the games, that you have very expansive stories that you like to tell, that, really deep thought to them. But the thing I've always respected about your narrative is that there's a message and a meaning. Each Metal Gear, I think we all know, had, very deep meaning to us and themes about, what's happening in the world, or passing on, your genes, your memories. Why the appeal of working with these actors inside of these games? What do they bring to helping you tell these stories?
いろんな、ロバート・デ・ニールとかも好きな俳優であればもしかしたらそのゲームに出ていただくかもしれないと思いますけど、ノーマン・リーダース、マツ・ミケルセン、ギレモ・エル・トロ、こういう有名な俳優、映画俳優をいろいろ採用されてきています。特に小島監督といえばゲームプレイとストーリーテリングをうまく融合させている長いカットシーンを、深いストーリー、必ずよく考えられたメッセージ、意味が必ずそこにあると思いますけど、そこをすごくリスペクトしていますが、なぜ、映画俳優なのか、映画俳優が何を小島監督のゲームに提供しているのか。
僕らが作るものって CG なんですよ。ゼロから作り上げる。でそこは人工物だったんですね、今まで。で、アニメーションと一緒で、キャラクターも仕草も動きも絵作りも頭の僕がイメージしたものをそのまま追求して作るだけだったんですけど、それではやっぱ面白くない。そこにやっぱりそのライブっていうか俳優さんの、演技とか、僕が予想もしなかった動きをすることでさらに作品が良くなるっていう、そういう、ライブ感が欲しかったんで、俳優さんを起用したということですね。
So far, what we created was computer graphics. It was artificial. It was something man-made. When it comes to animations, I pictured a specific movement, and we were trying to trace that movement. And that is not that fun. I wanted something more lively, somewhere where the actors go on stage and do something that I didn't even imagine. And I wanted to have that more lively feeling. And so that's why, because that makes it better. So that's why I started working with this movie actors.
ある種100% 僕の言う通り CG ではできるんですけど、そうじゃなくて俳優さんを入れることで、僕のイメージより大きなものっていうか、予想もつかなかった、ハプニングがあったりしますけど、そういうものを入れ込みたいっていうのがあります。
In a way, if it's 100% computer graphics, then we can completely do what I imagine. But that's not what I want necessarily. By bringing actors, they do some things that I don't imagine, and that alone makes the project bigger. There's happenings on stage, or different things that happen, and this is what I want, and that's what makes them better.
実写の映画でいうと、外でロケーションすると、天気も変わるので、突然雨が降ったりするシーンがあって、雨のシーンじゃなかったのに雨が降ったりして、それが逆に良かったりするんですけど、僕ら CG なんで、雨を止めることも降らすこともできるので、そういった意味でライブ感っていうのが欲しくなったです。でそのライブ感を表現できるテクノロジーというか、そのスペックがゲームを持ち出したということです。
Let's say in a standard movie, when you film outside, sometimes you have a scene, you cannot control the weather. So, for example, you may have a scene where it was not supposed to be raining, but it's raining, and that changed the scene in a way that actually made it better. If it's computer-generated graphics, we can make it stop, we can make it rain anytime we want, but we wanted that random element. And in a way, you can say that technology is up to that point where you can reflect all these things through the technology.
Yeah, I mean, it brings such humanity. I think even when we saw that first trailer for Death Stranding, you see Norman, and the reveal of that moment, and the emotion in his face and the baby. I mean, I think you feel a connection to that human connection. Do you, as people know, you don't only work on design Death Stranding, you're writing the script, you're really thinking about the entire production. When you write a game like Death Stranding, do you have specific actors in mind for these roles? Like when you first conceived of this new world that I think we all want to know more about, did you say, like, did you know Norman? Did you write the role for Norman?
すごいそういう要素によって人間味が加わる例えば最初のトレーラーでもノーマンの表情赤ちゃんの表情ですごい人間味が加わると思います。で監督はゲームのデザイン、スクリプト以外にも全体的なゲームの構成を全て考えていると聞いていますが、その中で例えば新しいゲーム新しいプロジェクトの時に特定の俳優を念頭に置いて書くんでしょうか。例えばこのデス・ストランディングの場合ノーマンにこの役をやってもらいたいということでこのキャラができたのでしょうか。
ですね、ノーマンを考えながらキャラクター作りをしてます。普通はキャラクター作ってこのキャラクターに合う俳優を探すんですけども、今回の主人公に関しては名前言うてしまいそうになったんで今回の主人公に関してはノーマンに演じてもらうということで、ノーマンをイメージしながら書いてます。
So in this case, Norman, I was definitely thinking of him when creating the character. Then he was about to sleep and say the character's name, but unfortunately he didn't.
I tried.
But for this main character, specifically, in this jam, he's writing and specifically thinking about Norman and developing and thinking with him in mind.
ティザーで最初ノーマンが裸で出てくるのも、裸のノーマンから入るというか皆さんに見てもらうと、これからいろんな服装とか、髪型とか装備とかがあまり言うとあれですけど、出てくるっていうのを期待してください。
For the teaser also, where you see Norman naked, that's something that I very specifically had in mind, that I want people to see first a naked Norman, and then from there you'll be able to see him in different costumes, different hairstyles, different equipment, and that's as much as I should say today.
Oh. So you will be wearing clothes in the game? Some part?
ちょっとゲームの中にもちょっと近づいてるってことですかね、今。Kind of. No.
Pushing too far. All right. Let's talk about we're talking about kind of the blurring of screens. Let's talk about some of the storytelling techniques you use and how much you sort of build off the film industry. I think today there's been lots of talks about games that tell narrative in different ways, and some games have, cutscenes, story scenes, gameplay sequences. Other games blend that all together. When you're kind of thinking of ways to tell your story, what sort of cinematic flair do you try and bring to your games in terms of how you tell them? I know you're very conscious of like what the shot is and how it's going to look. How do you design the narrative parts of your games? How do you want to tell your stories, and how much of that is inspired by, as you said, this moment from this film is something that inspired you to tell the story in this way?
ストーリーテリングのテクニックに話を移行します。ゲームのストーリーをどのように伝えるか、ゲームによってはいろんな方法を混ぜながら、映画の方法論とかを混ぜながら、作るところもありますけど、小島監督の場合は、例えばショットこういうショットにしたいっていうのは常に頭に入っていると思いますが、ストーリーを伝えるときにその方法論をどのように考えていますか
？30数年前、もうファミリーコンピューターの時ですね、ゲームがすごい面白かったんですけど、当然物語がないんですけど、それ以上に世界観というか目的が、キャラクターたちがなぜ戦うかっていうのがほとんど、描かれてなかったんですよね。
Well, 30 plus years ago, we go back to a Famicom or NES. There was no storyboard, but even more, there was no world in there. There was no goal per se, why the characters are doing what they do.
なんで物語とかドラマ以前にキャラクターの背景とかをちゃんとしたかったというのがあります。
So before the story, before the drama that is going there, I wanted to depict the characters themselves.
例えば僕の大好きなスーパーマリオブラザーズってあるんですけど、クッパっていう亀がピーチ姫っていう女の子をさらっていくんですけど、なぜさらっていくかもわからない。 それを配管工のマリオが助けに行く、人間が助けに行くんですけど、なぜ助けに行くかもわからない。でそういうゲームがいっぱいあったんですけども、そうじゃなくて、クッパがなぜピーチ姫をさらっていって、で赤の他人であるマリオがなぜ助けに行くかっていう、そこの背景とかそういう世界観を作りたかったというのが僕の最初のゲーム作りの動機です。
So, for example, one of my a game that I really love, Super Mario Brothers. You have Bowser that takes away the princess, and Mario goes to rescue her. But you're never told why any of this happened. So, I wanted to know why Bowser was taking away the princess, why this complete stranger that is Mario, this plumber, is going after her and trying to rescue her. So, I wanted to depict all that, and that was my initial motivation to start making games.
なんでキノコを踏み潰すのかは分からなかったんですよ。
I mean, why are you stepping on mushrooms?
でそういうのをまず作りたかったっていうのがあります。でキャラクターの設定とか世界観はちゃんと作りますと。
So first, that's what I wanted to make the backgrounds of the characters, make the world complete.
でその次がやっぱりドラマですよね。そのキャラクターが背負ったものとかをゲームをプレイさせながら、プレイヤーにどう伝えるかっていうので、今主流なのはそのカットシーン、もしくはプレイヤーがゲーム中喋ったり無線機で伏線、サブストーリーを言ったりするっていう手法ですけども、もっと他のやり方はあると思うので、そこはちょっと模索中です。今のやり方が正しいとは思ってませんので。
And well, after that comes the drama, how the character is going through all these motivations, and that I wanted to convey through and how to convey that through the gameplay. And like a very common technique right now is using cutscenes or using technically dialogue or monologue of the characters. And but in that regard, I want to explore different methods to do this. There must be other methods. I'm not thinking that the current methods are the correct methods or the only methods. I want to explore more.
So thinking of kind of where games are going, obviously you're deep in production on Death Stranding right now. I think everyone here wants to know how is production going on the game? How are we doing?
今開発中だと思いますけど、開発状況はどうですか、デストンダリングの、みんな知りたいと思いますか。
どう言ったらいいですかね。
It's very quiet.
PS4 で実際に動いてます。
How can we get there? Well, first, it's moving on PS4. That's it.
全体の企画、プロット、キャラクター設定とかは全部当然あります。
Overall, there's the general plan for the project. There's a plot.
で、デシマエンジンで、いろんな実験をしています。ゲームのシステムとかキャラクターとか、なんでしょうね、環境とかそういうのを実機で実験しています。
And well, we're working with the sim engine, and well, we're continuously doing different tests for game systems, for characters, for environments. We're continually testing these aspects.
で非常にいい感じです。
And it's going so far. It's going pretty well.
で、成功したものをこれからちょっとやり方を変えないといけないものもあるので、それを精査しながら、もっとそのプロットを細かく、シナリオを修正しているところですね。ゲームのシステムも含めて。
And for those experiments that end up in success, well, we're further testing and taking a look at how to plot more detailedly, and we're trying to put all these elements together.
ちょっとじゃあ具体的に言うとですね。
For example, in specific.
ただニューヨークでキャラクターがノーマンが歩いていると。
Let's say Norman, the character, is just walking in New York.
で、デシマエンジン上でニューヨーク作ってニューヨークに見えるのか、広さはどれほどなのかっていうのを、今実験しているところですね。
So, it's Norman, the character, will be in the sim engine.
ニューヨーク出ませんよ。
It's not in New York, by the way. The game is not set in New York. Just as an example, but we're trying to see if what we can depict with the sim engine actually looks like New York, if the scale is correct, and if it feels good there.
で、イタリアンレストランのところに入りました。
And let's say the character goes in an Italian
で
restaurant.
そこで、誰と会ってどういう話をしてどういうものを食べるかっていうのは決まってます。
So, who the character meets going into the restaurant, what he will be eating, all those details are decided, are set.
で今やってるのはその前後を考えながらどういうテーブルでどういうセリフを具体的に言って、どういう料理を並べていくかとか、どれを順番に食べるかっていうその細かいところを今、調整している
And
感じです。
what we're working right now is what kind of table will be there, what will be the specific dialogues that will be there, what are going to be the specific, what is going to be the specific menu in this restaurant. Those details are the things that we're tuning right now.
All right, layer of abstraction from that. But so what I am interested in sort of the creative process, because I remember many years ago visiting you and you had your scriptment books and you would have sort of ideas and the notebooks pass around and the team coming up with scenarios for gameplay. When you work on something like Death Stranding, even though we can't get into specifics, I'm fascinated. Like, do you write the script? Is it sort of like, is there a design document? Like, what is the process and how has that changed from how you made a game a decade ago?
そのクリエイティブプロセスに非常に興味があります。数年前訪問させていただいた時、スクリプトメントを作って、そこでシナリオを作ってたことを覚えていますけど、デストランディングでは、具体的なところには入らず、スクリプトを書いているのか、デザインドキュメントがあるのか、どういうふうにそれと今やってるやり方と10年前とどう変わってきたのか。
あんまり変わらないですよ。
First off, it hasn't changed that much.
キャメロンがやってたスクリプトメントっていうやつをいまだに最初文章で書くのが一番早いのでテキストで書きます最初。
First, what James Cameron does, but I'm doing also the scriptment. First, it's easier to do it on
そ
text.
れはスクリプトではなくてゲームのコンセプトから全部、どんな曲が鳴ってどういうものを見せてプレイヤーに何を与えるかっていう全部それが入っててどういうキャラクターがどういう服装をしてそこで何を喋らないといけないとかいうのも全部それが時間軸に沿って書かれているものです。
This is not a script, it's different because it has everything going from the game concept, what the character sees, what the player is given, what kind of costumes are going to be there, all this, everything is there in chronological order.
で当然それは毎日書き直しが起こります。
Of course, every day this is being rewritten.
で並行してキャラクターのデザインとストーリーボードをやりながら、プログラムの実験をして、修正しながら、そこまでが OK になると、スクリプトの部分だけ取って、そこは台本に書き直します。
And in parallel, we're doing the design of the characters, the storyboarding, and the testing on the actual hardware. And we edit all these things, we fix all these things, and once this is fixed, then we go back to the script and make it actually a storyboard with the dialogues, with the
カ
complete
ット
dialogues.
シーンの部分はおそらく映画作りと同じだと思いますね。
For the cutscenes, it's probably very similar to the way movies are made.
プリビズ作るんですけど当然P キャップする前にパフォーマンスキャプチャーする前に
So, of course, we do pre-visualizations before going into performance capture.
僕が好きなのはプリビズの前にビデオキャプチャービデオコンテするんで、僕がノーマンやったりしながら、人には見せられませんけど、ノーマンには見せるんですけどそういうのをまず、人が演じてそれを CG にちょっと簡単な CG に起こして、プリビズにします。
For the pre-visualizations, one thing that I love is that we do these video storyboards before doing the pre-visualizations where people in the studio, we do these performances, and based on that, we make the pre-visualization. I don't show that to anyone. Well, to Norman, maybe we show that, but that's about it. But yeah, I like this part where people are performing and then it's
I'd like to maybe picking it up.
僕らのスタッフでビデオコンテンツするんで、スタッフは俳優じゃないんですごい演技が下手なんですよ。
And the development team, the staff in there, we do this video storyboards. But because we're not actors, we don't have actors in there. We're really bad at performing.
ちゃんと喋れない。噛んだりするんですよ。
We cannot even say the dialogue straight. We just mumble the dialogues.
で、僕のシナリオが悪いのかどうかわからないんで、そこを修正したりするんですけど、あまりよろしくないですね、そこはね。
I don't even know if it's because of the stories are right that it's looking like that. So it's hard to tell. Sometimes I fix it, but yeah, it's not a good thing, I guess.
How much, as you're going through this process, how much do you rewrite? I think people are fascinated about sort of, do you have the locked script and then you sort of move into the performance capture? How much do you go back and traditionally, or you think on this game, how much has changed from your original vision already?
どれぐらい書き直すんでしょうか。どれぐらい最初から決まってたものから変わっていくのか。
イメージは変わらないですね。ストーリーラインも変わらないです。細かいところは変わります。当然プログラム上でできないこと、表現ができないこととか、メモリが足らないとかもあるので、そこは、修正します。
The overall idea, the overall storyline doesn't change. The small details, for example, things that program-wise are impossible, things where we run out of memory, those things definitely need to be adjusted.
コジプロ内で全部完結するように作っているので、非常に無駄がない作りです。
Because we're making it in a way where we can make the whole thing within Kojima Productions, we try to avoid any unnecessary processes.
キャラクターの設定をして、新海洋二のとこ行って一緒にデザインをして、新海洋二がデザインしたものを CG 化するんですけど、不都合外はそのまま新ちゃんのとこもう一回戻ってその場で直すので、外注を使うとそうはいかないと思うんですけど、毎時間毎分修正しますので、川上で修正食い止められると。
So, for example, I make the settings of a character, then I go with Shin-chan, that's Shinkawa Yoji, and he makes the design. Then when he makes the design, we go with the rest of the team, and they make it in computer graphics. And if there's something that doesn't work, they go straight back to Yoji Shinkawa, and we make these fixes. That's something that I don't think we could do if we were outsourcing all these things. But in this regard, we're every hour, every minute, we're changing things.
Anyone that follows you on social media knows that you're constantly inspired by music and, every form of entertainment. I'm curious, where do you feel you're sort of at your best creatively in terms of a, moment? Do you like to, write down ideas on the weekend when you're thinking of, idea? Like, where does inspiration sort of come to you best when you're writing the story? Do you work on it mostly in the office, or is it you have to sort of go away on a vacation and then it finally becomes clear to you? Tell us about sort of your creative process.
ソーシャルメディアで監督のことを追っている人はみんな音楽とかいろんなエンターテインメントに影響常に追ってるとみんなしていますけど、一番クリエイティブになる時間ってあるんでしょうか。例えば週末だとか、ストーリーは必ずオフィスで書くのか、それとも休みを取ってそれで出てくるのか、どういうところで一番アイデアが出てくるんですか。
よく聞かれるんですけど、考えているのは今も考えているので、寝ている時間以外はずっと考えてます。ストーリーとかゲームとかキャラクターとか演出とか。
That's a question I get often, but I'm thinking of the story right now. I'm thinking of the game right now. So except when I'm sleeping, I'm constantly thinking of the story, of the game elements, of the design, this all the time.
で、事務所に行って出力するときは考えたものを、出力するだけです。
そこで
悩んで考えたりはしませんので。
So when I go to the office, I'm merely putting the output of what I've been thinking all the time. That's not a time where I have doubts or I have concerns. I've been thinking about all this long, and there's only the output.
なんで家族と旅行行っても考えてるんで怒られるんです。
So when I go on a trip with my
ここにあらずみたいな。
So when I go with a trip with my family, I'm still thinking about the game. So they don't like that. It seems like I'm not there for them.
Yes. Wanted to ask you about inspiration, though, because I think you're very inspired by film. Many of you probably read your essays on Rolling Stone and Glixel about many of the films you see. We see on your Twitter feed always meeting filmmakers. What are some of the films that have inspired your filmmakers that young filmmakers today who you think have helped inspire you with Death Stranding or just in creative in general?
インスピレーションで特に聞きたかったのは常に映画を見たり、グリクセルでのエッセイを今連載していたり、でツイッター見てるとやっぱりいろんな映画を作ってる方に会っていますけど、特に今若い世代で作 作られた映画で自分に何か影響を与えたもの、インスピレーションを得たものって何かありますでしょうか？
僕が
So that he was influenced by the young filmmakers, right?
Yeah, yeah, filmmakers that today are
今
inspiring
の
you.
若い映画で自分がインスピレーション。
今の若い、映像作家の人はもうゲームを遊びながら映像を作っているので非常に感覚が近いですね。でデジタルもすごく使い慣れているので、話するとすごい近いものがあります。
Well, young filmmakers, they're making the movies while playing games. They're very used to what is digital. So when talking with them, I feel really close with them. There's a lot of common conversation.
10年、20年ぐらい前はやっぱり映像の人ってフィルムは24コマで僕らは60フレームとか30フレームって言ったらもう共通言語全然なくて、非常に話が合わなかったんですけど今は全然そういうことはなくて映画の制作プロセスとゲームの制作プロセスはほとんど同じなんです。最終出力がゲームなのか映画なのかの違いだけなんで、そこはすごくすぐ仲良くなります。
10, 20 years ago, it was different. Movies were in 24 frames per second. Games, well, we're talking about 30 FPS, 60 FPS. So there was no common conversation. There was very little we could talk about. That has definitely changed right now. The process of making a game and the process of making a movie, those processes are very similar. It's just the output that changes, whether that's in a game or a movie. So it's very easy for me to have conversation in topic and get close to young filmmakers.
昔からゲームはデジタルなんですよね。でデジタルでスタートして、8色16色しか出なかったんですけど、それが、何万色という色が出るようになって音声が使えるようになってムービーが再生できるようになって今は 3D なんですけども、映画はずっとアナログだったんでそのアナログとデジタルの共通言語が合わなかったのでそこで全然話が合わなかったんですけど今はもう当然映画もデジタルで 3D になってますし制作スタイルというかプロセスはほとんど同じなんで、非常に昔とは違いますね。
Games have always been digital. I mean, when games started, you had 8 colors, 16 colors, and now you have thousands of colors that you can use. You have audio elements. You can play movies. Games are currently in 3D. And movies have always been analog. So there was no conversation in common there. But of course, movies have now become digital. They have been using a lot of elements for 3D. So the style, the processes are very common. So in that regard, that is something that has changed a lot.
Yeah. Are there any recent films that have really inspired you?
なんか最近の映画でインスピレーションを得たものってありますか？
最近の映画最近の映画ね、キングコング面白かったですね。
Recent movies, King Kong was a good movie.
Yes. Skull Island, yes. Yeah, lots of great films recently. One thing that is here at Tribeca is VR. I know you had a chance to sort of go through the immersive VR experience. And what's interesting there is there are a lot of, filmmakers traditionally using, video, trying to, move into VR, and there are game engines that are being used to create, interactive VR experiences. I'm curious, what you thought of some of those experiences you got to see, and, what role you think VR and AR will play, in gaming in the future.
このトライベッカでいろいろ VR がありますけど監督は映画を作ってる人たちが VR でいろいろやろうとしているゲームエンジンを使ってインタラクティブな VR の体験を作っている。でここでいろいろ展示されてますが監督はそこに行ったとおっしゃって聞いていますがどんなものがありましたか。また VR、AR が今後のゲームにどういう影響を与えていくと思いますか。
VR アーケードを遊びに行ったんですけどゲームを作ってきたクリエイターがVR だの AR を作る手法と全然違うアーティストドキュメンタリーを撮った人とかが作っている VR 非常に面白かったです。
Yeah, I went to the VR arcade here at Tribeca, and definitely, for example, game creators that have always been creating games have a specific approach, and the approach that these people take is very different. VR experience that is made by someone that has always been working, for example, in documentaries is very interesting. I found all this stuff really, really interesting.
ゲームと映画ってやっぱりそのインタラクティブとノンインタラクティブで違う方向だったんですけど、VR と AR でおそらくそこでクロスする接点になると思います。初めて。
Games and movies always have had this fundamental difference that is being interactive or being non-interactive. But with VR and AR, I think there's a point in common. There's a place where they do overlap.
もともと写真ってこうフレームなんですね。
First, a photo has always been something that is a
それ
frame.
は絵画もそうです。キャンバスも四角で、こ
A,
のモニタ
a
ーも
painting, these
全
monitors
部フレームなんです。
have always been a frame.
で、130年ぐらい前にリュミエール兄弟が映画作ってもそれもフレームです。
When 130 years ago, the Lumiere brothers created movies. Also, that was in a frame.
ノートブックもそうですし、本もそうなんです
A
けど、
notebook is also in a frame. A book is in a frame.
フレームの中にどういう情報量を入れるかっていうのが今までのメディアですよね。
So the media so far has always about what kind of information you put in a frame.
で、これはゲーム、インタラクティブなメディアのゲームも、FPS でも一緒なんですよ。フレームの中にどう入れるかで、カメラは触れたりしますけど、やっぱりフレームの中の情報をどう与えるかっていうことなんで、
And this goes the same for games that are interactive. Game, something, a first-person shooter, anything. You can move around, but still, it's about what kind of information you put in that frame. That
でそれが VR とか AR になるとフレームがなくなる、フレームじゃない見せ方、情報量の制御っていうのをいかにするかっていうのがゲームでも映像でも問われるっていうことなんで、そこは非常に面白い世界になると思います。
And when it comes to VR, AR, you lose that frame. It becomes something completely different. It's about how you put this information in a completely different canvas, in a completely different way. So, and that goes the same for games as well for video. So that's something that I'm very excited about. That's something that is very interesting.
なんでその何かをこう銃で撃つとかっていうのじゃなくて、360度見える世界で演出家、アーティストは何をどう見せるかっていうことが問われてくるので、そこは非常に面白いですよね。
It's not about shooting something. It's about in this 360 degrees environment, what the artist will put in there, and how the artist will convey that. That's what is being questioned right now, and that I think is it's very exciting.
で、物語のストーリーテリングの見せ方って非常に難しいんですけども、トライベッカの VR 面白かったのはやっぱりドキュメンタリーというか、今までフレームで見せてたドキュメンタリーをいかに VR で360度で見せるかっていう試みがいっぱいなされてたので、そこは非常に面白いものが出てきそうです。
And so storytelling becomes very difficult at this point. But so that in Tribeca, what I saw here was very interesting because there were very different, a lot of attempts at conveying a documentary, for example, in a 360-degree environment, and that is very interesting.
And you think the next layer will be that interactivity? And I think we've had lots of games, now VR, like that's potentially the blending, right, of sort of a lot of this storytelling. But then allowing people to sort of, not only look in 360, but sort of interact in the environment. Do you think that's going to, further blur sort of the screens between games and filmmaking because you're in this immersive environment, and let people, sort of shape the story versus having one, directed narrative all the way through?
次のレイヤーがインタラクティビティでしょうか。その360度でストーリーを見て、なおかつそこにインタラクティブであることが、映画とゲームの接点になっていくのでしょうか。
必ずしもインタラクティブじゃなく、インタラクティブちょっと語弊がありますよね。その360度どこ見るかっていうのはユーザーが決めるので、それこそがインタラクティブなんで、何かを操作することでお話が分岐するとかそういうことじゃなくても、十分インタラクティブなんで、そこは、旧メディアとは違うところですよね。だからそこを、アーティストがどう表現していくかっていうのが、今後問われると思うんです。例えば、四角のキャンバスに絵を描くっていうのが今までだったんですけども、360度どこに描いてもいいわけなんで、それで表現方法が格段に広がるので、それはインタラクティブではもうありますけど、非常にこう 面白い未来が待っていると思います。
Well, not necessarily. I mean, there's one thing that Moses said about interactivity. When you're looking 360 degrees, when the people are choosing where to look, that alone is interactive. You don't necessarily need to add controls there and let people shape it. But in old media, that's very different from old media. The artist needs to depict, to think about how to depict this. For example, if it's a painting, before when the artist had to depict in a square canvas, now, well, he can put anything anywhere. And he has to think of how to express their art in there. So I think this is very, very interesting what comes ahead.
Mm-hmm. When you make a new game, as you said, it sort of is fully, you fully immerse yourself in the creation of the game. But there's still those moments where I think, you get frustrated by the technology because, games are this interesting blend of art and science, technology. What are still some of the things that frustrate you about making games today that you hope in years to come will be easier?
そういう意味ではゲームはまた技術が必ず関わってくるので、ゲームとは常にそのアートと技術を織り交ぜたものになるんですけど、今でもまだ、技術がここまで来てないからいまだにそこにフラストレーションを覚える、こういうことはしたいのに できる。そして近未来でこれが解決されるといいなっていうものはありますか？
いっぱいありますけど、日々テクノロジー進化しているのでいずれはできると思うので、今は今日できることを使ってクリエイトしています。5年10年経つといろんなことができるのが分かっているので、シュリンクすることは絶対ないので、なので、すごいポジティブに考えています。
Well, there are many things, but the thing about technology is that every day it moves forward. So I try to focus on what I can do today because I'm confident that whatever I can think of in 5-10 years, I will eventually be able to do it. So there's no way that technology takes a step back and starts shrinking. So in that regard, I'm very positive, and I try to focus on what is already available.
よくゲームを1本作ってでインタビューされるんですけど、できなかったことありますよね。でそれを続編に入れますかっていうそういうことはしません。
Often when I complete a game, I go into an interview and one question that I'm often asked is, well, there must be things that you couldn't do in this game. Are you going to put that in the sequel or your next game? But I don't do that.
次作る時にはもっとできることが広がっているので、そこでのクリエイトになりますね。
When I'm working on the next project, then there will be many other things that I will be able to do. So I try to think of it at what will be possible in the next stage, next project.
When you've got a great engine, the Decima engine with Guerrilla Games working, as you said, for the game, which we can't wait to see, running soon, we hope. Also, I wanted to ask you, you talk about the excitement of making games and how, you're always inspired because technology is moving forward. Do you ever have interest in being, going and directing a film or getting into the film industry, moving forward? Is that sort of on your list of things you'd like to do, or is it all games?
デシマエンジンでバンゲリーラと一緒にやってて大変、近いうちに何か見れるということを期待しています。で、そのゲームを作る楽しみを今語っていただいたわけなんですけど、映画業界にまた興味ありますか？その近いうちじゃ自分がいつか映画を撮りたいという気持ちはありますか？それともゲームに従事したいですか？
映画大好きなんで映画いつかは撮りたいですけど、今はちょっと無理ですね。DS 終わってからです。
Well, I love movies, so definitely, one day I'd love to, but right now it's impossible. I mean, at least until I finish the training, it's impossible.
一つ心配しているのは映画が好きすぎてですね、完成しないんじゃないかと。周りの人もよくそういうふうに言います。小島さんは映画が好きすぎるんで、ダメ出しばっかりして完成しないんちゃうかと。
One thing that concerns me when I think of this is that I love films too much that I maybe if I start making a movie, I will never finish it. People around me agree with that. Yeah, they tell Kojima, you're too demanding of movies that you will always find something that you will want to fix and you will never finish a movie.
ゲームの場合は最終的に皆さんに遊んでもらって完成するのでそこまでじゃないんですけど映画はやっぱり、作り込んでそれを見てもらうということになるのでちょっとこう違うものですね。
In the games, this is not the case because in a game, ultimately, the game is completed the moment you play it, so there's a limit to what I can do. But in the case of movies, you make it, you do your best, and that's what people see. So it's a little bit different in that regard.
If you were to make a film, would you want to make a film, inspired by the world of Death Stranding or Death Stranding from, or do you have a totally different idea of something you maybe one day would like to make? Do you know?
いつかもし作ったら、じゃあデストランディングをインスピレーションにした映画を撮りたいですか、それとも全く違うものを作りたい気持ちですか。
いや全く違うものですね。すごく、ブロックバスターの巨大な予算を使ったものか、すごいインディーズの、主人公とキャラクターが2人ぐらいしか出ない、密室劇みたいなそういうのでもいいかなと思います。
It would be something completely different. I would like to do either a big budget blockbuster or a small indie movie, with two characters all the time in a room or something.
Do you ever write down like an idea for like that indie movie that you say one day maybe I make this and you put it in a drawer?
そのインディーの映画でそのアイデアを書き出すことはありますか。いつかこれをやろうって書き出すことはありますか。
頭の中にはいっぱいあります。いいアイディアって上書きされるので、上書きされても残っているのがいいアイディアなんでアイディアに関してはあまりメモとかを残さないです。
I have many ideas in my head, but the thing about good ideas is that they constantly get overwritten, and the few ideas that remain there until the end, those are the actual good ideas. So I don't write out too many of these ideas.
Excellent. Well, we can't wait to see what the next ideas are. I think I speak on behalf of everyone here saying that you have inspired all of us with your work and really shown, I think, the true potential of the gaming medium to tell stories and immerse us in incredible worlds. So thank you so much, Mr. Kojima, for joining us here at the first Tribeca Games Festival.